very excited to be launching our 40 Artists in Conversation today with Judith Bernstein and Linda Mary Montano, two artists who really helped shape the history of the museum, starting from the beginning of the new museum's history up until more recent years. And so, yeah, please, welcome. And I was really honored to actually work closely with Judith on her exhibition here in 2012, Judith Bernstein Hard, which was in our lobby gallery of the museum. And it was actually surprisingly her first solo exhibition at a museum, which is very long overdue. She was included also in the group exhibition here at New Museum, The Last Newspaper, a year prior to that. And in the years since, her work has gained considerable recognition with major exhibitions in institutions from London to Norway to LA. And she recently has a great show that's up at the Drawing Center, a few blocks away from here. And that show will close on February 4th, and a new show of paintings at Paul Kasman Gallery will open this January. And Linda Montano was kind of involved with the New Museum right at the beginning. She was very close with the museum's founder and director, Marcia Tucker, and was included in many group exhibitions and public programs here right at the beginning. However, her most well-known project was her 7 Years of Living Art exhibition, which was here from December 1984 to 1991. In this performance, she literally merged art with life, surrounding herself in environments that completely transformed her experience emotionally, physically, and spiritually. She has a new book that just came out, which I have here, which was recently published by Cy and Adam Silverson, and it's called 14 Years of Living Art. Actually, there's a nice picture inside with Linda and Marcia Tucker together doing a performance here that she did actually right at the culmination of the 7 Years of Living Art performance. And specifically for that project, she set up shop in the storefront window, which faced Mercer Street in the back of the museum, and met with people there in the room, which was painted a single color, which corresponded to 7 chakra colors. And the color would change annually, so every year that she did the project, the color would change. And she's actually prepared a special performance related to this project to get us started and kind of launch this series of conversations. And the performance, I'll let you, actually we have a bunch of performers here which will tell you much more about the 7 Years of Living Art project. And there are 7 Glandettes who will stand in for Linda and introduce themselves, and Gland Angels. And yeah, please stand. And the angels are Leah Aaron, Lorene Babushian, Lydia Bronner, Mary Campbell, Barbara Sorellis, Tamara Toon, Kristen Holfoyer, Marina Kelly, and Priscilla Stadler. And this will be done as quickly as possible as a feat of endurance and speed, because in this world, we're not sure how much time we have left.
Red.
Can you imagine that I'm Linda Mary Montano's second self? Thank you. I represent the first chakra, the first gland, the ovaries and testes. Dr. Mishra taught me about the chakras. On December 8, 1984 to December 8, 1985, everything I wore was the color red. Shoes, coats, all clothing for the entire year. Daily for a year, I stayed in a room painted red, 3 hours every day. Daily, I listened to the note B, 7 hours a day using an oscillator. I intended to make friends with intimacy and my ovaries that year. My guide for that year was Joan of Arc. I talked in a French accent with Emily, one but my family, and I made only 1 chakra drawing that year. For 16 days, 2 collaborators lived with me at my summer state camp located at the Art Life Institute in Kingston, New York. The curator of the New Museum, Marcia Tucker, provided me with a room they painted red. It was at the back of the museum facing Mercer Street. I came to that room once a month for that year, and for 7 hours each visit, I performed art life counseling, tarot, and palm reading with museum visitors. Actually, my name is Astronaut. Please make believe that we are now singing a song of appreciation to our ovaries and testes.
Orange.
Can you imagine that I am Linda Mary Montano's double? Thank you. I represent the second chakra, the second gland, the pancreas. Dr. Mishra taught me about the chakras. On December 18th, 1985, until December 8th, 1986, everything I wore was the color family. And I only made one chakra drawing that year. For 16 days, 2 collaborators lived with me in my summer saint camp located at the Art Life Institute in Kingston, New York. The curator of the new museum, Marcia Tucker, provided me with a room painted orange. It was at the back of the museum facing Mercer Street. I came into that room once a month, and for 7 hours each visit, I performed art life counseling, tarot, and palm reading with museum visitors. Actually, my name is Jennifer Fisher. Please make believe we are now singing a song of appreciation to our pancreas.
Can you imagine I am Linda Montano's carbon copy? Thank you. I represent the third chakra, the third gland, the adrenals. Dr. Mishra taught me blah, 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 blah. Everything I wore was the color yellow. Shoes, coat, all clothing for the entire year from December 86 to 87. Das macht überhaupt keinen Sinn, alles zu wiederholen. My guide for that year was Alberta Hunter. I talked in a jazz accent with everybody but my family. And I made only one chakra a year that year. Blah, 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 blah. The curator of the new museum, Marcia Tucker, provided me with a room painted yellow. Blah, 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 blah. Actually, my name is Heide Hartry.
Can you imagine that I am Linda Mary Montano's twin? Thank you, I represent the fourth chakra, the fourth gland, the thymus. Dr. Mishra taught me about the chakras on December 8th, 1987 to December 8th, 1988. Everything I wore was the color green. Shoes, coat, all clothing for the entire year. Daily for a year, I stayed in a room painted green, 3 hours every day. Daily, I listened to the note D, 7 hours a day, using an oscillator. I intended to make my friends with compassion and my thymus gland that year. My guide for that year was Meride Lisieur. I talked in a cowboy accent with everyone but my family. And I made only one chakra drawing that year. For 16 days, 2 collaborators lived with me at my summer saint camp located at the Art Life Institute in Kingston, New York. The curator of the new museum, Marcia Tucker, provided me with a room they painted green. It was at the back of the museum facing Mercer Street. I came to that room once a month for that year, and for 7 hours each visit, I performed art life counseling, tarot, and palm reading with museum visitors. Actually, my name is Danny Gallietti.
Can you imagine that I'm Linda Mary Montano's clone? Thank you. I represent the fifth chakra, the fifth gland, the thyroid. Dr. Misha taught me about the chakras. The color blue, shoe coats, all clothing for the entire year I wore. Daily for a year, I stayed in a room blue, 3 hours every day. Daily I listened to the note, 7 hours a day using an oscillator, intended to make friends with communication and my thyroid that year. My guide was Catherine Hepburn. I talked in a British accent with everyone but my family, and I made only one chakra drawing that year. For 16 days, 2 collaborators lived with me at my summer sand camp located at the Arts Life Institute, Kingston, New York. The curator of the new museum, Marcia Tucker, provided me with a room they painted blue. It was at the back of the museum facing Mercer Street. I came to that room once a month for that year for 7 hours each visit. I performed art life counseling, tarot, and palm reading. Actually, my name is Andrea Henke. Please make believe we are now singing a song of appreciation to our fire.
Can you imagine that I am Linda Mary Montano's look-alike? I represent the sixth chakra, the pineal gland. From December 8th, 1989 to December 8th, 1990, I wore everything purple. All my clothing for the entire year, every day, daily I stayed in a purple room for 3 hours. My intention was to make friends with nutrition. And my pineal gland. That year, daily I listened to the note E from an oscillator for 7 hours. Mother Teresa was my guide. I talked in a Russian accent. I made only one chakra drawing. The curator of the new museum, Marcia Tucker, provided me with a purple room at the back of the museum facing Mercer Street. Once a month for a year, I performed art life counseling, tarot palm reading, and invited visitors. My name is actually Magdalene Piragos.
Can you imagine that I'm Linda Mary Montano's doppelganger? Thank you. I represent the seventh chakra, the seventh gland, the pituitary. Dr. Mishra taught me about the chakras. On December 8th, 1990 to December 8th, 1991, everything I wore was the color white. Shoes, coats, and all clothing for the entire year. Daily for a year, I stayed in a room painted white, 3 hours every day. Daily, I listened to the note F 7 hours a day using an oscillator. I intended to make friends with joy and my pituitary gland that year. My guide for that year was Dr. Aruna Mehta. I talked in a normal accent with everyone but my family, and I made only one chakra drawing that year. For 16 days, 2 collaborators lived with me at my summer Saint camp located at the Art Life Institute, Kingston, New York. The curator of the new museum, Marcia Tucker, provided me with a room they painted white. It was at the back of the museum facing Mercer Street. I came to that room once a month for that year, and for 7 hours each visit, I performed art life counseling, tarot, and palm reading with museum visitors. Actually, my name is Kathy Brew. Please make believe we are singing a song of appreciation to the pituitary gland.
And for Marcia Tucker. Some bright morning, when this life is over, I'll fly away to that home on God's celestial shore. I'll fly away. I'll fly away, oh glory. I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by, we'll all fly away. Thank you, Glandettes and Gland Angels, Margot and Judith.
Thank you, Linda. And now that we're all in touch with our glands, I would like to speak with you, Judith, a little bit about your show here, too. And I was very honored to work on that show with you, which, as I mentioned before, was your first museum show. Surprisingly, and you've actually lived a few blocks away from here since
And still
1967, and still do. Yeah. We worked on that show, and internally kind of called it a pocket retrospective in the lobby gallery, because we included work from kind of throughout the scope of Judith's career, starting with these early drawings that she was making as a student at Yale in the 60s. Which were during the Vietnam War era, and really resonated very viscerally with me then, as they do now, and also included her biomorphic screw drawings from the 70s, her signature piece painted directly on the glass, and a new painting, which is kind of these very, very vibrant paintings that she made, actually started out making during that time and continue to make today. Judith, just a few words about what that experience was like, and also just seeing all your work together in that way.
I'll tell you frankly, it was a terrific experience working with Margot. She was just super fab. I say that because she actually had in mind this pocket retrospective, which worked super with my work. And my work in a certain way is autobiographical, and one thing leads to something else. I started out as a student at Yale School of Art in the graduate program, and when I was there, I read an article in the New York Times that said, "Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf?" And that title was taken from bathroom graffiti. And the time I was at Yale was an all-male school. I immediately went into the bathroom, and I went into the male bathroom, which was a lot of fun. It was great insight, and I waited till the guys were out, by the way. But nevertheless, it was wonderful because there was a lot of graffiti there, and there was a lot of graffiti about the Vietnam War, which was an extraordinary thing because there was a draft, and as a result, it's a different situation than we have at this point. And they were drafting people that were college age and graduate school age. So I not only started doing graffiti and scatological graffiti, which was frankly a lot of fun and a lot of insight. It was a great experience for me, and when after I had there was a lot of limericks, which was a lot of fun, and I had people who were writers, and they would give me all the lines. They would give me all the vocabulary: cock, dick, prick, etc. And it was great for me. So after I was doing these graffiti paintings, and they were on grade canvas, I started doing Fuck Vietnam paintings and Fuck Vietnam drawings, and they were directly address the Vietnam situation. And there was an enormous amount of rage and protest that was out there, and I captured that. And the paintings were very visceral. They also, some of them had some of them had, for example, you had a woman with spread legs that said, "Baby, the fucking you get ain't worth the fucking you take," having to do with Vietnam, a soldier's Christmas in Vietnam, and you had Christmas lights around the vaginal area. So it was very punchy. There was also a Vietnam salute, and there was a whole potpourri of these paintings that I made. That was part. I had drawings of those there. I also had a drawing that was on canvas called the Fun Gun, and it was an anatomical drawing of a cock with bullets in the nutsack and coming out, 45 bullets collaged on, and it had a trigger, and it had those. It was live ammo. They were attached, and that was a piece that Paul McCarthy had purchased. You can see where we're going with that one. Anyway, so that was in the show, as well as a lot of the large screw drawings that after I had worked with the Vietnam War, I did these large screw drawings. They had to do, the screw drawings were like, they were horizontal and they were vertical, and they were 9 by like 30 feet, and they had a lot of impact. They were charcoal, was done with a very fragile medium, intense charcoal, and they were on paper. But they created a lot of punch and a lot of wallop. They were about anti-war, they were about sexuality, and they were about feminism. Mine's bigger than yours. And not only that mine was bigger than yours, the guys may have the image, but they may have the image, but they don't. They have the organ, but they don't own the image. So after I was doing these very large screw drawings, which were also included in the show. What's interesting is that now they also there's a lot of subtext with the work, and the work can also be interpreted in things that are happening right at this moment with the Harvey Weinstein and other things, because you're talking about the penis as power, the penis as a weapon, and the penis as entitlement. So after I did those pieces were in the show, I also had The Birth of the Universe. Now, The Birth of the Universe was great because it was what I was starting in. I always wanted to figure out how to get into using female iconography. And I had used, my idea of feminism was observing the men. So that's how I worked with these very large images of screws. And the subtext really is the subtext that you would have, for example, in a Jackson Pollock painting. So that would be the subtext. So there was a lot of psychological insight that I had, that you have when you see the work. Then with these large vaginal pieces, the cunts, I love using these terms. They're kind of the last bastion of crudity, right, that we have, but nevertheless, I use these cockeyes, cunt-face pieces, and I compare them to the solar system, which basically is the Big Bang, the birth of the universe, and in comparison to birth in general and women being at the center. So I have observed a lot of anger and rage that women have, the angry cunt. And I was part of a lot of women's groups, including the Guerrilla Girls, and there was enormous amount of rage that women had. They had a lot of rage because they wanted access to the system that they did not have. Now, of course, I also found that within my primal family, my mother had a lot of rage, and she did not have a career. She was a housewife, but she didn't like the life that she had. So that women have a lot of rage. I use that rage. Historically, you have a very passive woman that has been used historically. So I wanted something that was angry and aggressive, and the Big Bang, and worked out very well in terms of that. I used hot fluorescent colors, which popped it out, and that's what I wanted. I also did, which I loved. I did this large drawing that Margot had suggested, and more than that, wanted me to make on the wall, on the glass wall in front of the show. You have my signature, and the signature really was women at the center. It's about stardom. It's about male posturing. It's about ego, and it's about my ego too. So when I don't leave myself out of it either, by the way, in terms of the critique. So what happened was that when you see this on the glass, this is the first time I actually used paint to make it. You see it on the glass, and then you can look through. And when you look through the glass, it's like going into my mind and going into the history of my work and where I went from one thing to another. Also, this piece was great at night because they would have the lights on and you could see it from the street. So it had a lot of impact. And the drawing itself was 16 by 66 feet. So we're talking a big mother drawing.
It was painted at night. Judith climbed what was it, like a 16-foot ladder?
Yes, yeah.
And painted it directly on the glass. And it was something is interesting, like to think about these works in dialogue with one another. Was the signature piece was kind of directly in front of the screw drawings.
Right.
So they had this like nice. Also, like the way that you're talking about male posturing, you're talking about the ego.
Sure.
They had this kind of nice, conversation between them. And something that was interesting about those screw drawings that I just wanted to mention quickly was that they were shown for the first time. It was the first show at AIR Gallery. It was in 1971. But at that time, a lot of the feminist artists were not exploring the other, the men. It was, a lot of imagery of the female. And actually, one of the works that we had in that exhibition was censored from a show in Philadelphia, which was actually co-curated by Marcia Tucker.
That's correct.
And Anne Darencourt, and it was a group of...
Anne Darencourt and a sculptor, Lila Katzin, and Cindy Nemser, and Anne Darencourt, of course, but Marcia was part of that. Yeah.
So no, I was kind of interested in how that affected your career, or how that being censored from exhibition, which is something that you've kind of been involved in ever since, in terms of organizations like Fight Censorship and Guerrilla Girls, and
that's correct.
And how that piece, it was one of your biomorphic screw drawings that was in this exhibition in Philadelphia, and how first of all how it became censored in the first place,
right?
And what were the repercussions of that?
Well, it's interesting because I had worked with this imagery for a long time, and I didn't starting in from 1969, and the show was censored in 74. So I had been working with this for a long time, and I didn't think that the work was lewd or pornographic, although frankly that's the way it was marketed somehow. And what happened was the curator of the Philadelphia Civic Center, Marian Aquilera, she actually was aghast by it. Then John Perrone, who was the director, was also aghast by it, and then also went up to Mayor Rizzo, the mayor of Philadelphia, a very reactionary mayor. And John Peralt had a funny line when I was censored. He said, "Now it's on to Boston," you know. But anyway, all these people got together and they said people will be, that they always blame it on women. We have to protect the women, by the way, always protect the women and protect the children, as if children were going to come to the show. But nevertheless, it created, it got a lot of coverage. They had a petition that a lot of very well-known people signed at the time, and of course Marcia Tucker was part of that too, since we're bringing that up because of the new museum, and also so many people who were Louise Bourgeois, enormous amount of people who were in the show as well as curators, and but nevertheless it got a lot of coverage. But I was actually just kind of dead in the water after that, because somehow it was people were thought everyone would be offended by seeing this work, which of course was I think certainly not the case. And they printed up buttons for these that said, "Where's Bernstein?" So everyone wore these. Although my piece was not in the show, they had buttons that were printed up that said, "Where's Bernstein?" And a lot of people asked me if I were going to go to the opening, so I said absolutely not. A friend of mine, Walter Di Maria, said, "If you go to the opening, they're going to say, 'Where's Bernstein?' She's right over there." So I couldn't go to the opening, but I did see the show, and it was a show of 100. It was about 100 women, and they were women who were an entree into the art world, people who were comers, and also people who were very well known, like Louise Bourgeois, Louise Nevelson, and the Louises, as well as a lot of other people. But it was a strange time for me, and it was something that all of a sudden I caught the wave of this censorship. So it was. But as a result, when I didn't show for so many years. It was many years I didn't show for about, I would say 25 years, something like that. I showed a bit with these very large group shows that were feminist shows, but I was actually asked by a lot of women that they felt that if art was not self-referential, that dealing with the vagina and dealing with then it was not feminist, which is certainly not the case. And my idea of feminism had to do with observing men, and also I've now done with observing women, which of course, and I have a show that's currently at the Drawing Center that's against Donald Trump, which is called Cabinet of Horrors, and I have buttons that I made that were printed up that said, big buttons, by the way, about 4 inches square, 4 inches round, that was a takeoff on Frankenstein, Frankenschlong, and also Cabinet of Horrors, and another one is the presidential seal, that is the seal of disbelief. And also another one is Judith Bernstein, 2020. So
You're running for office.
I hope I will get your vote, guys. So really, I hope you'll get your vote. And also, it has to do with insight too. So the show has humor in it, and humor is a very big part of the work that I do. And the same kind of thing with the show at the new museum. I use the word hard, Judith Bernstein hard, for the show, and obviously with the phalluses, it was about that, but it was also the difficulty I had showing, and it was a different time frame. When I was young, I went to Penn State as an undergraduate, and when I went to Penn State, there were 3 men to every woman, and that has changed considerably. Then I went to Yale, which was an all-male school, and the graduate students, there were 3 women in a class of 20 in terms of the graduate students, in terms of the painting and sculpture department. And but I did not find any prejudice or difficulty when I was in academia. But I found when I graduated, then I hit a wall, and as a result, the art world was really exclusively pretty much male, and there would be sculpture shows there would be all male, and they would not say this is a man show, but if they had a show later on that were a women's show, a show of women artists, they would say this is a woman's show. So it was very patronizing in how it was addressed. But nevertheless, that's kind of the long story to a question that you asked.
No, it's fascinating, and I mean it's so crazy to believe that work that was censored, now we put it out so it's facing the street, and kind of
That's
anybody
right.
that walks by the museum, would
Right.
see your signature piece and those
Right.
screw drawings, and I think something that's interesting about both of your shows. Well, I mean, Linda was of course included in many important group exhibitions here as well, but the 7 Years of Living Art in particular, was facing the window out onto the street, and I thought that platform is a really interesting one, that Marcia Tucker kind of put together, was that these exhibitions that are, so facing the public and kind of bring the street into the museum. And, I know that besides the 7 Years of Living Art project, there was also another piece that you did in the window, and we're just curious if you could talk a little bit about those.
Hello. Yeah, before I do that, I have 15 questions for Judith.
Oh my God. Oh my God. I have a couple for you too also. Go ahead.
But this is how I do therapy now when I go to my therapist, who has seen 5 people before me.
Right.
I bring questions, and I say to her, Lucy, between 1 and 15, pick a number. And she goes, oh my God, I'll take 7. But I want to do number 10.
Oh, cool.
And I want the Glandettes to stand, please, and the angels. And they're going to hum. Judith, your career has incredible dedication to service, to causes. For example, the way that you cured your mother's anger, the way that you learned painting from your father, who painted in the cellar with his friends.
Yeah.
The way that you were dedicated to the cause of assisting other women artists. The cause of protesting the dearth of shows for women as an activist in the Guerrilla Girls. The way you were willing to be anonymous as a guerrilla girl. The cause of founding a museum for women only called AIR. Thank you, Judith. The cause of participating in the Art Workers Coalition. The cause of the Fight Censorship group. Thank you, Judith. Your motivation to justice is biblical. In looking back, in looking forward, can you see that your art and your performances have caused changes coming from your loyal service to these mighty causes? You have walked through the 7 chakras and made sure there is better funding for women's shows. You have opened the heart chakra, bringing your love for painting, for justice, for activism, for transparency of sexual images and sexuality to us all. Judith, more respect is now shown to women artists. More women are included in major museums and galleries, thanks to women like you, Judith. Question 10. Thank you.
That's so sweet. That's so sweet. No, it's so sweet. I want to thank you so much, Linda. I'll tell you frankly, I love the tribute, but I didn't do it alone. There were so many women who also knew that it was important to have the woman's voice, and I'm glad that I was part of that. And I had a vested interest, obviously, but it was more than just my own vested interest. It was the interest of women in general. And injustice has been a very pivotal point, a pivotal thing for me my whole life. So it's been quite a journey, quite a journey. Thank you is the point. Yeah. You know, it's funny. I remember with the Fight Censorship group, Anita Steckel had this line that was always so fabulous. She said, and it was a little strange, but she would bring this up all the time. She would say that if your museum is wholesome, and if a penis is wholesome enough to go into a woman, it should be wholesome enough to go into a museum. And she always got a laugh, and she was so right. And also I always talk about AIR, which was great for those of us who had no other options to be able to show. And Howardina Pindell gave that name to the gallery because she said that she said Jane Eyre, and then we said AIR, AIR, and it was actually the code that they had downstairs. If firemen saw AIR, they knew, by the way, that there was an artist in and we should get out. But it was, I kidded around at the time. I said, let's call it TWAT, 20 Women Artists Together. But I, of course, was ahead of my time. So anyway, that shows you some of the laugh lines, but also it's a very serious issue. Yeah.
So, Linda, the question still remains, and actually, we don't have that much time left, unfortunately. So, I would love for you to kind of speak about that experience in particular. I can also imagine, just hearing from all of you, about the, dressed in these colors, about that whole experience of 7 years of living art. Your wonderful orange peach outfit today. Surrounding yourself in a color like that must just be for an entire year.
I was always curious, Linda, about buy the book. Yes, buy the book. I was always curious, Linda. Your work is so intense, and also tied to someone for 1 year must have been an extraordinary experience. And how did that change your life in a lot of ways? And also the intensity of the color rooms. All this is really quite extraordinary experience.
All I can say is that art is a hospital.
Right.
Art is a psychiatric hospital.
Yes.
Art is a mental ward. Art is a language. Art is sometimes people's only language. Art is a child. Art is a trauma catcher.
Yes.
Art is a only place that you can talk.
Yes.
Art is depending on the level of your trauma, the only place you can work out your penances, especially if you're born Catholic.
I thought you'd bring that up.
Thank you for asking. Yeah.
But Jews have a lot of the penance too.
Yeah.
We're not immune to that either.
Yeah, but you're not afraid of cocks.
That's so true. That's so true.
Catholics are. But my dear publishers have decided that all of my really bad porn is in here.
I think porn is getting a bad name here, but I don't think that when you use sexuality, it's actually it's a negative thing. It's part of life. It's part of the human experience. So it's an important aspect. Yeah.
Well, in wearing all red and all orange and all yellow, all green, blue, purple, white, purple, blue, green, yellow, orange, red for 14 years, and sitting at the feet of my teachers, so many teachers. And if we could all just take a second and visualize our mentors, our teachers, our publishers, our curators, our neighbors, our mother who painted in the basement, and your father who painted in the basement, were transmitting this permission to go to the right brain.
That's correct. Yeah.
To get out of the left brain.
And to get out of the basement.
And to
So we actually need to move forward to the next talk.
Oh, wow.
But I think that's actually a very nice note to end on.
Come out of the basement.
Yeah, come out of the basement. Thank you so much, Judith and Linda.